at what point do you get that wisdom, though? Like you said, you could be 50 and still not have that wisdom. And how
Yep.
are you going to quantify that?
We're kind of verging into controversial territory here, but I think it's worth talking about.
And I think this goes so far as like, I don't think parents should be pushing religion or politics on kids.
I
It's
agree.
something that they should be exposed to and informed about and allowed to make their own decisions as they grow.
This is maybe a little bit controversial, but we're no strangers to controversy, and we don't shy away from it on this channel.
What if this climate change scare is real, real, and we're gonna all perish in, the next 70 years or something? Should we let 13-year-olds start having babies?
Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and we would really love it if you like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. That's what awesome people do. It really helps us out. So.
And I'm Casey Rochford, and we also write our own music, and it's going to be at the end of the episode. So you should be a champ and not a chump, and stick around to the end. So what is it that you wanted to talk about today?
I want to talk about, well, this is kind of a topic that goes in a bunch of different directions, but maybe we can kind of make a concise video out of it. But I want to talk about age milestones. I was listening to the radio on the way home today, and they were talking about some scientist's statement that he could reverse aging, that it was on the horizon. And so they had a little discussion about what age would you like to be if you could pick anything, if you could basically lock in your biological age. And it's kind of interesting, although they kind of focused more on the mental aspect rather than the physical aspect, which was a little bit weird because it's not time travel. It's
right. Yeah, you're not reversing your mind.
Yeah, exactly. But it was interesting, and it got me to thinking, like, what is age, and why are there so many seemingly arbitrary age-based restrictions and biases out there in society, many societies?
Yeah, and I don't know, it strikes me odd that it's so subjective from place to place. Like you can cross state lines and find a completely different set of rules. I think, I don't know if it's this way anymore, but I think Idaho, you only have to be 19 to drink, or at least at one point that was the case.
Yeah, I think they changed that nationally, but we could be wrong about that. Yeah, in fact, I remember when I was 18 going to Louisiana and drinking margaritas in the mall. Even though my home state of Washington, I should have been 21. And so it's like, well, that's kind of stupid. It doesn't really make any sense. And so I kind of want to talk about some of these sort of restrictions and stuff. And I don't know, maybe just discuss this whole thing about age and wisdom and why we put so much emphasis on it as being such a, I don't know, it was so important.
Yeah. So I don't know, where do you want to start? Like maybe like what is an adult?
Yeah, well, that would be good. Yeah, because I do want to talk about some of the specific restrictions or things like that.
Yeah.
But that is a good place to begin, because a lot of these things kind of hinge on well, you're an adult, so therefore you can make a decision for yourself. And that's a good point. What
Mhm.
is an adult? Because in my experience, I've known people who are 13 who are completely independent. They completely capable and able to support themselves and make decisions for themselves. Then I also know people who are in their 50s that pretty much can't even tie their own shoes.
Mhm.
So why is that number, the number of years you've been on this planet, the defining factor? I guess I get that there if you have some kind of legislation or some kind of rules or something like that, there should be some sort of standard.
Mhm.
But the standard of how many years you've been here doesn't really uh, align with your experience and your capability and knowledge and wisdom. So
Well,
I think
that's another point, is it's almost also related to intellect, because if you think about it, intellectually disabled people below a certain IQ threshold are considered, not autonomous, let's say. you know
Mhm.
like like physically they are an adult, but mentally they're thought of as a child. But I think it's better to phrase it a little differently, like they're not
I would,
really,
yeah,
really a child.
I would say more it's an experience kind of thing, how much
Right.
experience you've had and how much growth you've uh, undergone throughout your
Hmm.
life. And obviously, people that have a mental disorder might have a little bit of a struggle going through that growth compared to those of us that um, have our faculties all, well, close to 100%
Yeah.
and can do that. That's the whole thing. It isn't a set thing. It varies from person to person and circumstance to circumstance. Um, and so it does seem a little bit weird that we make this kind of distinction simply based on years.
Yeah, it's definitely a gradient thing, because there's not just a switch that you flip at whatever age happens to be in your jurisdiction to be whatever, an adult, capable of dying for your army, or getting a tattoo, or gambling, but you can't drink, or you can't buy certain guns. And there's all kinds of these restrictions on who you can have sex with and who you can't.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's like all these restrictions are largely hard set on a single point, like uh, this line, and you know they basically say one day you're under this particular age and whatever you do is a criminal act, but the next day is perfectly okay,
yeah.
like anything goes. And I think, is a person immature until you've been alive a certain number of years, and to exactly that point, and after you cross that threshold suddenly you possess enough wisdom to make those kinds of big decisions. Maybe it's causing harm by convincing people that they are intelligent enough to make those decisions rather than basing it on something else. i,
Yeah.
I think it's more nuanced than that. It's not just like years that you've been here.
Right. um Man, there's so many roads to take here.
Yeah.
uh I don't know. Where
Well,
should we split off from
well,
here?
why don't we talk, let's start with the under threshold people.
Uh-huh.
um the big one that I think a lot of people think of when they think of somebody being underage or something, age of consent for sex. um and in a lot of the thing that gets me is, well, we live in the US, so we can only speak to that. So it's different in other parts of the world. Actually, very, very different in some places.
Been different in different, like time periods too.
Well, that's true. Yeah, in the US even it's completely different.
In fact,
And
I'll probably circle back around to that idea.
yeah, you should, because I think that's relevant, because though society and technology may have changed, people haven't. So that's important to note in
Or
that
have
regard.
they?
Huh?
Or have they?
Well, maybe somewhat, but so thinking about it in the US, um, you go from state to state, and all the rules are different. Here in Washington State, me as a 40-something-year-old person could have a 16-year-old girlfriend. Um, However, if we travel to, say, Texas, that's illegal, and I could be in prison for that. Um, uh, Other states vary accordingly. Sometimes there's uh, judgments based on the difference in age. Sometimes it's
Well,
like,
that's actually how Washington is.
I don't think it is.
I double checked that. Yeah, it's 16 plus 2, basically, or 17 plus 2, like 17 and 19 or something.
So,
It's
so
something
that
akin to that.
recently changed, because it wasn't like
No,
that.
no, no. It's been like that for like 20 years because I remember looking it up a long time ago.
Well, and
And
that's the whole point. It's confusing. It makes no
yeah,
sense. But there are states like that, and so it's kind of ridiculous. And then it kind of goes into the whole thing, like, why do we think that sex is bad or harmful automatically? That's another thing.
yeah. So I mean, I was not amongst this particular crowd, but I've known people who were peers that began having sex at 13, 14 years old, with each other in that age group, mind you. But still, it's like they, for all intents and purposes, I think a 13-year-old can decide what they want and don't want well enough to say, okay, that's fine, like if they're both consenting.
Probably. I mean, but again, it goes back to that whole thing. If they have the wisdom to make those kinds of decisions, which
Well,
maybe they do, maybe they don't.
at what point do you get that wisdom, though? Like you said, you could be 50 and still not have that wisdom. And how
Yeah.
are you going to quantify that?
I have an idea, and I think let's talk about some of these different things, and I want to kind of come back to that at some point.
Mhm.
But that's a really good point. And then here's another thought that kind of popped in my head. Why is it a good thing? Let's talk about sex between people. Why is it a good thing if you're having sex with people in your own age group, and not outside of that? Is it better or less harmful or something? Because are more experienced people possibly a better partner?
Uh,
I mean, we're
well,
we're kind of verging into controversial territory here, but I think it's worth talking about.
no, it is. So, as a biologist, of course, I'm going to take it there. We do have it kind of built into our evolution to go for the better genes, and as anything with time, cells decay, so it is natural to prefer uh, younger people, but um, that brings in this caveat of like, what if you have a really old guy and a really young girl, and um, obviously the guy's genes now factor into this. Like, he's a little long in the tooth, so half of the genetic makeup of the child would technically be substandard or whatever, but it's more of a social thing, like a sociological, like a more that our society is just kind of brought up from, where I don't really know, because childbearing age used to be like as soon as you, to be crude,
Puberty.
if she bleeds she can breed or whatever, like that saying, like that's
That
how it used to be.
used to be. Isn't that how it is?
well, in certain places, I guess.
No, I mean biologically speaking.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely. Biologically speaking,
So
like
that's
fundamentally, it's perfectly natural. I got to be careful what I say here. Like, well, when we're all 13, it's perfectly natural to want to have sex with each other. It's arguably still perfectly natural to want to have sex with people of whatever age happens to be your preference, because preferences are also a gradient.
hmm
Some like them skinny, some like them fat, some like them old, some like them
well,
young, white,
and
black, whatever. It's all a gradient.
and you brought up something before a little bit ago, kind of touching on the whole survival kind of thing. Um, Speaking on genetic compatibility and um, uh, I guess superior genes or something like that. But in today's world, things have kind of changed a little bit. Survival doesn't necessarily depend on superior genes, but maybe a superior socioeconomic status. So
Hmm.
if you're talking about mating with somebody, or maybe experiencing things or learning from somebody, you would want somebody in a higher class. I'm kind of averse to that term, but let's just say class for the sake of
Yeah,
argument. Um, that those kinds of people are going to be better for you moving forward in your life. If you mate with somebody who's your same age group, if you're 13, well, they don't have a job, they don't have anything. So if you have a kid, you're kind of screwed. But somebody that's older, um, I don't know, it could be more beneficial. But I mean, this is sort of a metaphysical, sort of philosophical discussion, I guess, more than anything.
yeah. I mean, I saw something on the internet the other day. It said something like, you know, guys that say, well, she's 17 now, but she'll be 18 in August, is, that's pervy. And it's like, well, in however many months, is it no longer pervy, or are you still going to call them a perv, but hey, it's okay now? Like,
That's exactly what I was talking about earlier, that
yeah.
one day under and you're a criminal, one
Hmm.
day over and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense? What about the people? What about somebody's psyche? What about their experiences? Those things are far more important than just a number, however
What
many
about,
years you've
what
been here.
about kids of, let's say, 15? That's arguably feasible, I think, that go to court for emancipation, and they're, all intents and purposes, fending for themselves for now. And is that okay now for them to have sex with somebody?
Well, I did actually want to talk about that, the whole age where you could live independently.
Yeah,
Here in the US, most people think when you're 18, you're legally separated from your parents. But why? And that does, yeah, what you said brings up a whole bunch of different things, that if you can live independently, you should be able to make all of the decisions for yourself, because you kind of have to at that point. Um,
yeah.
and so I,
But
man,
then there's things like, you may have autonomy in pretty much all aspects of life, but there are things that you still can't get, like alcohol, or you can't even, never mind alcohol, you can't even rent a car until you're 25.
yeah, that's
I mean, and that's an experience thing, so I can see that. But the alcohol thing, I think, is a little bit more biological. Like, your brain is still developing up until the age of 21, and
sure.
this is
But
why I'm
then,
a big proponent for making it, okay to have marijuana be at 21 instead of 18.
well, and that's fine, but those are legislative processes. They don't necessarily translate into the real world. I mean, when we were kids, let's say middle
Right.
school, high school, we could have gotten marijuana, alcohol, anything we wanted. The law means nothing. You can
Right.
get what you want.
It's it's
So
it's basically there as a strong suggestion, and a fair amount of people do adhere to it, but of course,
yeah, as long as we do away with the DARE program, just
Mhm.
say no and actually inform people of the pros and cons of a particular substance, I think we'd be better off.
Yeah.
Um, but that's kind of the whole thing. Like, man, so we wrapping up this whole like age of consent for sex kind of thing. Um, this is maybe a little bit controversial, but we're no strangers to controversy, and we don't shy away from it on this channel. But I think about this. Um, people, a lot of people, on one hand, say that kids like under under the age of consent don't know enough to have sex of their own volition,
Mhm.
but then seem perfectly fine allowing those same kids to undergo gender reassessment or reassignment surgery. And that kind of seems a little bit hypocritical. How can somebody
Yeah. Yeah.
not be wise enough to decide if they want to have sex, but are somehow judged competent to permanently alter their sexual biology? I, I'll just throw that out there for the sake of conversation.
I I didn't know you could do that under 18, really?
Yeah, with parental consent, yes, you can.
Wow. That is a little messed up, I think, because you know, I do think that, after a certain age, you've become mature enough to make certain decisions. Like, I really don't think, and I think this goes so far as like, I don't think parents should be pushing religion or politics on kids.
I
It's
agree.
something that they should be exposed to and informed about and allowed to make their own decisions as they grow,
Yeah,
because they're naturally going to like flip flop back and forth between things, and they're going to do that anyway whether or not they're expressing it. So it's better to just let them express it, because you're not going to create a bunch of crazy mental complexes that way. But
yeah, I totally
I'm not a
agree.
father, so I don't know.
Nor am I, but I think you're right that we should let people decide for themselves. Uh,
Mhm.
People being kids. Uh,
Yeah, so I mean, in that respect, it's fine. I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying, you should tell them out. No, no, you're a boy, play with Tonka trucks and stuff. No, like, you can treat them as they want to be treated, but you know, something so permanent, really, I don't. I mean, I know legislatively we've got to put a mark on it. That's kind of like the double-edged sword. You know,
do we though?
I mean, like, how
We'll,
else
we'll, we'll
do you?
talk about that later.
Yeah,
Let's.
it's hard to think of a fair way that doesn't require a whole lot of effort to
I
to
have a few
decide on
thoughts.
every single thing.
I've got a few thoughts on that. But no, you're right. I think,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, to me, I think it's so gender reassignment surgery is such a huge thing. Um, and
well,
and sex to me is kind of like not that well. It's a big deal, but it kind of isn't. Um, you can keep on going if you have sex with somebody. But if your genitals are altered in some way or your hormones are altered permanently, there's kind of it's hard to go back from that.
well, I think hormones are like a lifelong injection sort of thing. I don't know that there's a permanent per se alteration there, because if you stop undergoing your hormone therapy, you will kind of revert to your, uh, let's say, um, inherent gender.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
um, I don't know the best word for it. I apologize.
Yeah, nor do I. This is all just speculation, but that is a good point about not necessarily forcing kids to fit into a mold. If somebody, because I'm neutral on the whole gender and transgender thing. Like, I mean, if I don't think parents should be forcing kids to fit a particular role, um,
Mhm.
and allow them to explore things. Because again, that when you're a kid, you're learning things, so exploring is a good thing. But when you start undergoing surgery, that's where I start to get a little bit. I start to have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Um,
So I guess there's one other super controversial thing, and I don't even know if I should bring it up because I can't remember all the details of this article. It's been so long, but I read something, maybe it was in Psychology Today or something. There was some op-ed piece where somebody made an argument from like a biological standpoint that uh, pedophilia should not really be considered a mental ailment per se. Um, and I don't remember all the details, but you know, something akin to what we were talking about, how like back in the day, as soon as you were able to breed, you needed to, but you know, lifespans were, you know, you die by 30, 35 or
30. Yeah.
and so you know that made a little more sense. Plus, everybody you know kind of had to start pitching in around the
Well,
farm when they were.
actually, I want to bring this up too. Thinking about that, back then, yeah, it did make more sense. You would hit like 13, 14 or something like that, and you'd hit puberty,
Mhm.
and you knew that you only had like another decade or maybe two to live. So you have to raise a child in that time span, maybe several actually. Um,
Yeah. So
but
what if
but
this climate change scare is real? You know, real, and we're gonna all perish in you know the next 70 years or something. Should we
well,
let
yeah.
13-year-olds start having babies? You know?
Well, but the thing is, I think about that. Why is it that because technologically we've advanced to the point where we live longer, why does why do the standards of the past no longer apply? How come suddenly those kinds of things are suddenly wrong because we can live longer? It's just a question I pose. I have no. Um,
Well,
it's sort of just something that I think about, like because I do kind of self challenge on a regular basis, and I wonder about that.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, the article I read, if I recall correctly, and I really wish I could remember where it was so I could link to it. I think it was even arguing that, and this is where I kind of diverge from agreeing with it, kind
mm,
of. But I think it was arguing for the fact that there's not really anything inherently wrong with being attracted to like prepubescent children, and it's like
hmm,
I can see the argument for somebody who's like breeding capable of being like an evolutionary, you know, attractant, let's say.
sure. Well, it's biological. Yeah,
Sure.
I mean that makes perfect
Right.
sense.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like I mean, this is perfectly legal, so I don't mind saying it, but like when I was 18, I got well, it's not perfectly legal because I got drunk. Um, when I was
Wait,
18,
wait, wait. You were in Louisiana.
I got drunk and I made out with like a 14-year-old. But
Hmm.
you know, like that's like a 4-year difference, and you know, you look at that now. I mean, I've dated over a decade different
Hmm.
before.
Well, and I don't know the age difference. There's a lot of focus put on that when I think it should be more about like maturity.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a huge, speaking about pedophilia, there's a huge difference between somebody being attracted to and engaging in sexual activities with somebody who's clearly unable to make a rational decision. Let's say
Right.
let's say we could draw the line like 10 years old or something like that. That under that, it's obviously a bad thing. But
Right.
the difference, like that little gray line in your state between like 18, 17, 16, I don't consider that wrong. Like that's just, you know.
I that reminds me, like I kind of take issue with the loaded statement of statutory rape
I
because
do too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a, I mean, there's no better way to describe it than loaded. It's trying to ignite some emotions by calling it rape when the two, underage people could be perfectly consenting and perfectly capable of demonstrating autonomy.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. Like consent requires somebody, like you had said earlier, you'd asked the question, what is an adult?
Mhm.
Um, at what point can you make that determination? And I don't think it's a numerical thing. I think it's an experiential thing.
Right. Like to be
So
able
to
to
say
argue
like,
in court, like, look, I'm so responsible. I do blah, blah, blah. And, it should really be something like that. And you should be able to testify, like, we were both consenting, like,
yeah,
it,
well, and to speak to your experience with somebody younger, when I was in middle school, I had a huge crush on somebody in their 40s. Um, and that would not, if there was a sexual experience, it would totally would not have ruined me. Um,
yeah,
saying so, I don't know. It goes back to the whole thing. Like, why do we see sex as a bad thing?
I'm sure everyone remembers Mary Kay Letourneau. Well,
Oh yes.
you remember someone that you and I know, may or may not have written some music with us, um,
Hmm.
met Mary Kay Letourneau in a bar. She's still married to the guy, to the kid, to the guy. Well, he's a guy now. She's still married to that guy.
Yeah.
That was her student that she got fired for and like publicly shamed across the entire world, basically.
Yeah, which I kind of feel like might actually be wrong because who are we to judge somebody else's experience, somebody else's love, somebody else's emotion? If you're not doing something with ill intent, then I don't know that it's necessarily inherently wrong. Just
Yeah.
because we have legislation that says, here is the defining line between good and bad. And I've gone in this with a minute microscopy about morality, ethics, and the law. That
Mm.
laws are not necessarily the definitive or the definition of morality.
Oh,
Um,
seldom
yeah,
do they
yeah,
ever
yeah, exactly.
coincide,
And
actually.
and if you look at the politicians that pass such legislation,
Yeah.
they're definitely no stranger to immorality. Um, but
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, if you look at intent and consent, I think that's really all that matters. If good intentions and consent exist on both ends of things, or on all three ends, if it's a three-way or whatever, like whatever it is, if everyone in the party is down to party, let them party.
Yeah, because again, what's the harm? I would honestly, in fact, I asked this question to the viewers. Why is sex wrong? How does sex cause harm? Like really, I want to know because I don't see it. Like,
Consensual sex.
yeah, yeah,
Consensual.
consent. No, no, exactly. That was that was implied.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, but
Um,
sometimes you have to spell things out for people.
that's true. Yeah, because what is it about having sex, a thing that is a natural biological function? Um, what is it about that does damage to somebody? And if it does damage to somebody at below a threshold, why does it not above that threshold? Like, I don't understand.
I mean, like,
It does have a lot to do with consent. It has a lot to me. It has a lot to do with consent and experience and individual analysis of the circumstances, what the intent is.
yeah,
Yeah.
to some degree, I think the only argument that stands there could be like um, the regret aspect. Like,
But that exists no matter what your age. You could be 70
exactly,
and
yeah,
the same thing is going to happen.
I think the argument most people have is that young people probably don't realize, experientially what they will and they won't regret. You might think you want to eat a pound of chocolate, and that sounds really good and it tastes really good while you're doing it, and then when you're throwing up chocolate, it doesn't taste quite the same.
Yep, that's a good point. And I think maybe because we kind of did focus on this a little bit early on, the idea of childbearing. Um, to me, looking at the technological advances we've made and um, the fact that there's been female contraception for quite some time, and now several there's several options for men,
Hmm.
including that gel that you can rub on your skin that's being developed.
Yeah, they're coming up with something in Australia that's even better because gels have, I mean, you can transmit that stuff through contact, and bad things can happen and stuff.
Yeah,
So
the whole thing is there are options, and
yeah,
so the whole like causing harm by impregnating somebody is kind of a thing of the past if you're responsible.
right. Well, now here's the
So
thing, though. This just came to my mind. What you're talking about with birth control is hormonal corrections, and if you start playing around with that during puberty, I think there could be actual, real long-term ramifications to that.
okay, you're right. But let's say we're talking about age gaps here.
Hmm.
So if there's somebody that's older who is using contraception,
Oh, I
um,
see. Yeah.
then that whole thing is moot.
Right.
Like nobody can get pregnant,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
man or a woman.
As soon as male contraception comes on through the FDA, it would totally be like it would take away that excuse effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, but so I mean, I know sex sells, so we should definitely we,
Yeah.
talking about that
This
is
video is gonna have like 6 million views. Like,
yeah, yeah. But to me, I look at the age kind of thing, and I think it's a lot more than sex. It's autonomy, it's self ownership,
mhm.
it's who you are as a person, and there's so many more things to discuss here. I was reading an article recently where people in the US were proposing lowering the voting age to 16. And
All right.
so we could talk about that. Let's go into that, the voting age.
I'm all for that because I know plenty of. I mean, here's the thing: voting isn't obligatory. So if
True.
you're 16 and you've taken some poli sci classes and you're really into it and you keep up on it, you've got an opinion, you've got a little know-how. I mean, I would argue that people in school are probably more well versed than your average Joe because it's fresh in their heads.
No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Now, do they have the wherewithal to make a good decision? Well, honestly, I can't
Does
argue
anyone?
that anybody else does, that quote unquote adults do.
Yeah.
Um, but sure, they're being affected as well. But then if you lower it to 16, why not 14? Why not 12? It's affecting everybody. So,
I mean, I don't know. Like
yes,
maybe for something like that, you could have applications. Like you take a little mini, poli sci test, and if you've got a pretty good grasp of how things work in the government or whatever, it's probably fair to let you vote at whatever age you test in.
Okay. So let's say we do that for people who are, quote, underage.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we do that for adults?
Yeah. If you pass sex ed with an A,
Yeah.
you can go have sex.
No, voting.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're still on voting. Yes, that's
Got
right.
sex in the brain. Yeah, it's okay. So do I. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, I agree with you that there should be some kind of something um, to delineate those who can make a decision from those who can't or shouldn't. But we draw this line when you turn 18, 21, 25, that beyond that, well, you're good.
Yeah.
You're probably smart enough, intelligent enough, wise enough to make those decisions. Yet time and time again, that's been proven wrong.
Yeah. If you can pass a written exam to become a citizen of the United States of America, you should be able to pass a written exam to vote.
Yeah. So if we had that, then it should be across the board. Anybody, even an 8-year-old, should be able to take that test and attempt to pass it.
Yeah.
And maybe everybody should pass it. Because again, I don't think
Hauser should have been able to vote.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that age really has anything to do with it. Here's the thing. I'll just like break right now and say this. If you spent all of your years on this planet watching video game play walkthroughs and let's plays and stuff like that, bunch of YouTube videos, you played Minecraft all your days, didn't do anything else, but you were here 18 years, suddenly, well, okay, now you're smart enough to do whatever. How does that make any sense? And that's the thing that's the thing that I wrestle with this is like, a number doesn't mean anything.
Well, I think this could even tie into our education episode because, we may just not be preparing people well enough to quite understand what's really going on in the world.
I totally agree that we're selling our kids short.
Yeah.
Because by the time they're 13 or 14, they should probably be pretty world wise. I was, but I was a rogue at that point. So,
So, what other aspects did you want to touch on with this age issue?
Well, you brought up something actually that I wanted to talk about, which is military service. So, and you brought up the whole like, well, you could shoot guns at foreign people you've never met and kill and die, but you can't have a beer, which I think is bullshit. Just saying. But then it brings me back to like, how can you even engage in such a thing? How can you agree to give your life for those things at such a young age with no experience whatsoever? I mean, there's that whole song from back in the day, the 80s, I think, called 17. How most of the soldiers in Vietnam were 17, but in the World War II, they were in their 40s.
That was a Winger song, wasn't it?
What's that?
That was a Winger song, wasn't it?
No, but well, maybe it was. I don't know. It should have been. Winger's awesome. Maybe we'll throw that in there somewhere in the links. But it's a good point. And then going back into the whole like smoking and drinking thing. So you can take up arms. You could take a what they call an assault rifle and shoot opponents of your country, killing and dying, but you can't have a cigarette. you can't have a beer. Why? Why not? What how is a cigarette or a beer worse than killing somebody? I I don't understand that shit.
Can't you buy rifles when you're 18 though?
You can, but as far as like military service, I think 17 is the age when you could sign up for military service.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you can sign up, but you can't start until you're 18, right? Is that how
That's
that works?
true. Yeah, it's true. But then you go into states where the smoking age is 21, and things get a little bit dicey at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you go back to like World War One though, and there's like little kids fighting, and
In
I,
some countries, yeah, that's
well,
true.
in our country, I think even that happened. I think I'm not a history buff.
Hmm.
I'll have to ask Powers.
Yeah, yeah. Let's bring Powers into this for that side of things, because I'm pretty sure that in World War One, World War Two, the soldiers were like my age, older, experienced people,
Hmm.
um, but not all of them.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm just basing this on a Motorhead song about a kid that died in 1917 fighting for his country. Maybe that was England.
Points for bringing things back to metal. Wait. Are you talking Motorhead or Motorhead? Yeah. So how about this? How about the age that you can start to earn a living, either through working at a job or starting a business?
I mean, if you are capable of doing the skills that uh, the standard going rate pays, whatever age you're capable of it. They'll let people start working as young as 14 now, I think.
I think that's relegated to farm work.
Oh,
Um, I don't know why, because honestly, you should have work experience as a kid.
yeah.
Um,
I had to be.
Ideally, you should have business experience, because running a business, that's why I have like a huge soft spot for the kids that start lemonade stands, and I patronize them all the time, um, because I think it's awesome. But the cops don't agree. Um, but the thing is, like, again, we think that there's some kind of exploitation happening or something, and it's like, no. To me, I see it as experience. You're starting out, you're learning things, um, getting your feet in the water, and you don't have anything to lose because you're living at your parents' house, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it
I think you know what it probably boils down to is I can just imagine parents being like, well, they need to focus on school and get good grades because
mm,
grades matter. And
yeah, but what does a grade matter when you're out in the real world trying to earn a living and trying
right,
to pay the bills? It doesn't matter for shit.
yeah,
Um, you know, what matters is your ability to actually earn a living and manage your budget. But we don't teach that in school anymore. Home ec is all about popping popcorn and stuff like that. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but my experience has been that way.
yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk about is the age to enter into contracts. So you sign something saying you're going to oblige yourself to a particular condition, um, an exchange. Somebody says, "Well, I'm going to give you this, tit for tat kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
a car loan or something like that." Um, and as far as I know, it's 18 in the U.S. Does that make
Probably.
sense? Do you think that makes any sense?
I think contracts are stupid to begin with. I got all kinds of feelings about that.
Well,
Uh,
contracts are voluntary. I mean, if you read everything, um,
Yeah, but it's kind of just a way for the wiliest and most cunning to dupe the other party, if I think.
Well, it depends on your perspective, but I see it as a way of doing all the stuff that the government does, but not with the government. But that's okay. Well, that's a whole different conversation. We'll go down that road another day.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so okay. Well, what do you think about Social Security?
oh, I fucking hate them.
I totally agree. Yeah,
3 minute
here's the thing.
microscopy about Social Security.
You
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Social Security is a contract, and you're signed onto it from birth if your parents are so obliged, because it is voluntary. By the way, to all the parents, yes, I'm going to say this right now: you do not have to sign your kids up for Social Security. Um,
Hmm.
it might create some strife, but it's overcomable. Um, but that's the thing: we sign our kids up. They can't even breathe yet, and they're already signed onto a contract to pay something. Um,
My Social Security card, the signature on it is like my second grade signature. It's so childlike.
Second grade, wow. My parents signed me up when I was a little kid, and I didn't know anything about it until like years after I could have possibly gotten out of it. If I could, I would, but that's a whole different story. Um, hmm. Do you have any other things talking about like underage kind of stuff?
Well, I think the overage issue was kind of an interesting
Yeah.
point of view.
So we've talked quite a bit so far about underage, and a lot of people kind of hyper focus on that. But what about the whole overage angle? What about bias against older people?
I
Um,
mean, the thing that immediately pops to mind for me is driving. Uh,
yeah,
I think there comes an age, maybe not necessarily an age, but like, an individual's point in their life where it's no longer safe to drive, either for them and or other people.
sure. I have an easy solution for that. Um, you know, when you're well, presumably when you're 16, it could be whatever. For me, it was 21. Um, but you take a driver's test. You have to demonstrate your ability to operate a motor vehicle on the road
Mhm.
and in a parking lot
You
for
should have to
whatever
do that
reason.
every so often.
Yeah. So when you renew your license, maybe every other time or something like that,
Mhm.
you have to take the same driver's test to show that you still know what you're doing. It
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, hell, pilots have to do that kind of shit.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
like the rules of the road change all the time, and you're just kind of expected to just magically know that they did. Uh,
yeah,
so there really ought to be a standard for renewing your license. You shouldn't just have to like go in and pay some money. You should
yeah.
be paying money for a new class or something. You should get something out of it that,
Take take the driver's test again,
yeah,
because
refresh your memory.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's not about like a punitive kind of thing. It's a matter of challenging somebody to keep up on their toes about changing technologies and changing dynamics of the situation. Um, if you could just like pay your 30, 40, $50 or whatever it is and keep renewing in perpetuity, well, there's no incentive to learn about all the changes.
Mhm.
And I think we've seen the repercussions of that. Um,
And
I
well, the other thing is like when you fudge things on the road, it becomes muscle memory, and you start to develop these bad habits. Well, if you periodically re-up your license through a test, you would be able to identify those things and correct them before they become a bad habit.
Sure. And you know, for people getting older, your senses dull a little bit. You lose your eyesight, your hearing, things like that. And eventually you can't interact with that world as well as you could. And that's not to say anything bad against people that are elders, because they have a lot more experience than us. But when you start to not be able to see things clearly and hear things as well as you could, well, you're actually a danger to those on the road.
It's these goddamn LED headlights. They're too bright.
Oh God, don't get me started on those damn LED headlights.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
that's an episode right there, I think.
yeah, we could probably do that. Um, and now, while I have a problem with making a stark delineation between ages, I think there is something to be said for the driver's test to be re-upped from time to time.
Yeah.
Even, here's the thing: even a few years after you take the test, things have changed. So it's all about like getting along on the road and understanding the way everything works and working together. Um, at least that's what I was taught when I took driver's ed in my 20s. um, so, but I don't know that, people are like, well, you're going to take my driver's license away. No, just learn some stuff, develop your skills, improve your abilities, and it'll be good.
Mhm.
Um, so moving on from driving, what about employment? Because there's definitely, people talk about biases in employment all the time.
Yeah.
But there's definitely an employment bias against older people in certain industries. What do you
You
think
don't
about
even have
that?
to, yeah, you don't even have to be that old. Like, a large reason why I never ended up pursuing a PhD, because by the time I would finish it, I would be in my early 40s. Well, now if I started, probably mid 40s, if
Yeah.
later, and then you've got postdoc stuff to do. And by then, who wants to hire a 50-year-old for, like with no experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's hard for people who are in their late 20s just getting their PhD to find work based on their age. That's what I've heard in my field.
Hmm.
So I mean, like that's kind of ridiculous.
That's
But
crazy. That's like up there with like strippers and stuff like that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, strippers and scientists, we go very well together.
Indeed. Uh, yeah, no, that's a good point. That I and yeah. Oh man. Wow.
Well,
Whoa.
it's got to be even harder if you're like in your 60s and you still feel pretty vital and you want to work and not get bored. Because I mean, honestly, like what's that statistic? Like people who retire and don't really do anything are dead within X amount of years usually.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people retire and then they realize, like, oh, my drive to live came from my job, the
which
thing that I
which
did.
is pretty fucking sad in the first place.
Well, it depends on what you do. Maybe
Yeah,
you're doing something worthwhile, and it's okay. And worthwhile is subjective too. It's you, you may think it's ridiculous, but to somebody it might mean something.
like
Um,
yeah, but I mean for the average person that just I don't know, like made stacks of paper perfectly even for a living 8 hours a day, and then they're just bored when they're not doing that. Like that's kind of sad. I don't know.
maybe, but again, it's subjective. And wow, we've got a couple of other episodes right here going
Yeah,
on
yeah,
about that. I encourage everybody to watch Dirty Jobs. hosted by Mike Rowe, because it's enlightening about what you do for a living and the meaning of life and stuff like that. It's good. But
Yeah.
damn, oh wow, we covered so many things.
Yeah, this is a good conversation though.
Yeah, and I don't even feel like we barely begun, but I want to come back to what I was saying before about the whole age, like numerical delineation, and how to overcome that and create something that's kind of equitable and a little more fair. And I think the way we used to do it made a lot more sense. We, as the human tribe, there was there's a concept called the rite of passage that used to be sort of the way that everything was done. It didn't matter what your age was, you had to take on a trial or a test. And if you passed it, you were worthy of being whatever outcome you were testing for. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because it accounts for any different age. Somebody who's 9 or somebody who's 50 can all take this kind of test. It's a societal thing, and the whole idea is you there's a challenge to prove that you can do the thing that you're endeavoring to do. And if you overcome it, now you can do that thing. Now you're worthy.
hmm,
And it it transcends all ages.
yeah.
And yeah, okay, you can't necessarily legislate that, but who cares about that if you're me? Um, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah. I think if you just like if this video went viral and somebody was like an employer and they saw that and they stopped and thought for a second, like, have I been giving people their fair shake or not? Like, if somebody comes to you 65 years old with a pretty good looking resume, maybe give them a shot.
Well, and going back to that whole rite of passage thing, I look at a resume, because I have actually hired people many times, and you and I have actually interviewed people in
Hmm.
the past when we ran a business. I don't care what somebody's resume says. I don't care what their uh, schooling experience is. I care if you can do the thing I want you to do. Can you connect wires together? Can you troubleshoot a bad circuit? Do you understand software? That kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
talking from a computer related industry, but it applies to everything.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's more important that somebody can actually accomplish the things that they would be employed to do, rather than their academic experience, the placards on their wall. Not to diminish what you have on your wall, because mad respect, dude. Yeah.
No, I think the resume is actually important as well, because I think people just read them incorrectly. I think
Huh.
if you see somebody describing themselves as a quick learner, or if you see them uh, with a wide variety of uh, experience, like I was a baker and I was a race car driver and I was an astronaut and I was a engineer or whatever, like most people are like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he wants to do, he's bouncing around. But like, look at all that experience that
Mhm.
he or she can pull from, to problem solve in creative ways with analogical thinking. And like,
Yeah.
age is what gets you all that experience. You can't possibly get all that experience when you're 16.
Well, that's true. No, if somebody came to you with a resume like that and they're 16, I would be highly suspicious.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be like, what, did you do that for a day or something like that? But yeah, if they're in their 60s, I'd say, okay, yeah, you probably have done all these things. You're a race car driver and rocketeer and all this
I
stuff.
think a lot of people are like, well, they're only going to be employable for a few years, but in those few years, you could get a hell of a lot of productivity from someone like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
true.
what really matters, output or longevity?
True. Well, and yeah, and some people go back into the work field after retiring because they kind of lose a focus and direction, and they want something because they realize like doing that work gave me purpose. And so I think discounting somebody because they're old and they've done a bunch of things is kind of doing a business a disservice.
Yeah.
But at the same time, discounting somebody that's young, that is ambitious, uh, because they have inexperience, is also a disservice to the industry.
What if our increased lifespan isn't creating the ceiling raising in retirement age, but the other way around? Like we say, oh, you can work, it used to be what, 55 and now it's 65. Like we should kept bumping it up. And
Yeah.
that's what keeps people living longer is they've got some purpose. They've got something to keep busy with, they've got.
Well, that's a good point because I've heard so many tales of couples that are married. They've been married for 50, 60 years or something. One of them dies, and then the other dies shortly after because they kind of lost all sense of purpose and self.
Yeah, and our life expectancy has recently taken a small dip, but that could just be from the economic recession 10, 12 years ago, where a lot of people got laid off early, got furloughed, like maybe it's just a lack of work that started killing people off earlier.
No, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah. Yeah, oh man.
What if the purpose of living really is to work and pay bills?
Oh.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I like
I do want to add that I think that work is valuable. Like doing something, accomplishing something, even if it's for somebody else's gain, it's something that gives you a sense of purpose. Because you're always working for somebody else's gain, no matter what, even if you're an independent entrepreneur.
Yep.
Nobody's exempt from that. But yeah. Oh man, wow, this has been all over the place. Wow,
it really has. Yeah.
covered so many different things, like old people, young people. It's amazing.
Pedophilia to retirement.
Yeah. Is that the title of this episode? Oh man, God, that is wow. And we haven't even really talked about everything we could possibly cover there.
No, but I think we hit the good ones.
Yeah, I think so. I want to hear what other people have to say about this, about anything. If you have different ideas or something original to contribute, please do. We always welcome discussion.
Yeah.
As long as it's civil.
Yeah. Don't call it dirty old man.
Yeah, or chumps. But we're used to that, so it's okay.
Yeah. Chump.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for deep sink diving with us, everybody, into all kinds of topics.
Yeah. Underage, overage, age in general. Yeah, this is a good topic. And stick around to the end of the episode. We'll have some kind of new song for you to enjoy. Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitchen Cinco.